Welcome to Show Studio. It's Milan Fashion Week, and we're going to be talking about the Prada show. Really interesting time for Prada, for many reasons. One, it's always the show that everyone looks forward to in Milan. Now we've got Gucci as well, which is exciting, but it's always such a spectacle. In terms of sort of old ideas of the fashion show, it's an amazing venue, amazing music, amazing casting. You really get that. But it's also, it's in a way a difficult time for Prada. From a business perspective, you know, the performance hasn't been as strong as I'm sure everyone working for Prada would like. But then they've kind of announced recently, which I was so surprised at, that they're dipping their toe into the buy immediately thing. And bags from this show, not all the bags, I've got it written down, is the Pioneer and the Carrière bags will be available to purchase immediately, well, from February 26th, which I was so surprised at, because I think everyone thinks of Prada as being a little bit sort of behind the step. So I was super interested by that. But before we kind of dive into sort of how Prada are operating, what they're using the show for, and kind of the future of how they're going to show their fashion collections and how they're going to sell their collections, I will let my amazing set of panellists and our surprise guest, it's exciting, introduce themselves, starting with you, Rosanna.
Hi, I'm Rosanna Falconer and I'm Business Director at Matthew Williamson.
Hi, I'm Katie Barron. I'm a journalist and author, and I'm the head of retail at stylist.com.
I'm Julia Hobbs. I'm the fashion news editor at British Vogue.
And I'm Nick Knight. I'm the director of Show Studio.
So I have to behave well, I see. Retail expert, business director. I'm going to go to you first. What does it mean that Prada are jumping on this buy immediately bandwagon? Because a lot of the commentary that we've done alongside these panels has focused on the fact that, you know, this really suits Burberry, a brand like Burberry, which is very obviously about commerce. You know, you don't think of Burberry and think kind of creativity, kind of raw, high fashion. And a lot of the houses in both France and Italy have responded, I think, quite strongly and quite defensively about Burberry's plans. You know, the Kering Group made some comments about how they didn't feel it equated to luxury. We saw, I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, it's Ralph
Toledano.
Yeah, you can say it better than I can. President, I'm not even going to say his title, President of the Fédération Française de la Couture, de Prêt-à-Porter, de Couturier et des Créateurs de Mode, so basically French fashion. He has said, Paris is undisputably the French capital of creation. As far as we're concerned, the present system is still valid. So he's very much kind of, you know, very much making the point that not all these groups are going to be jumping on a sell straight away. What does it mean that Prada are doing that?
Well, I think first of all it's worth saying they're doing two bags.
Yeah.
And so they are very much dipping their toes in the water. There's no doubt that Prada are a trend-led. I really think that they do create trends and produce the kind of fashion that for your average consumer, it often actually takes 6 months to contemplate. And seeing the collection through an editor's eyes or a buyer's eyes is very useful for them to understand the collection.
Yeah.
I would really wonder about whether they could go fully buy now, wear now, because I think the consumer appreciates the time to contemplate that collection and it becomes more desirable almost with the space from the catwalk. A bag is a perfect way to dip your toes in the water because it's an accessory and therefore instantly desirable. It's thinking
I agree.
fashion.
I think the fact it's this kind of small chunk is really the sort of imperative aspect here, because for me, and we're seeing it in other types of retail, loads of beauty brands doing it, a sense of fast versus slow retailing. So if you think of the fast as the kind of almost like brand bait, so you just use a small amount of things. Say in beauty, for instance, you've got people like Charlotte Tilbury who have like a 2-tiered store where you have 15-minute sort of mini tutorials and makeup sessions on one hand, and on the basement you've got a champagne bar, you've got sort of 60-minute, hour-long things, and it's the same kind of principle here of saying just have these little nuggets for those people that want the kind of the slightly less expensive, relatively speaking, pieces. Because it's quite habit forming, it's quite kind of ritualistic, but then if you kind of get people on that nugget, then you'll kind of groom them to graduate into coming to your stores, going to your website, you know, all the other parts of the brand that they can engage with. So for me, it's about acknowledging there has to be a level of choice and that kind of level of instant, you know, spontaneity. But it can't be the full shebang. I completely agree with Rosanna that I think, you know, this is much more, there has to be a long game on the other side as well.
Is there not that worry though, which is already the case, that everyone says about high fashion is the only thing that people buy is bags and shoes? And my worry about a plan like this is it makes it seem even more like the ready to wear and the actual clothing is not something that is that important to commerce.
I think it's the hook. I think it's that
Yeah.
bit of the bait again, and I think also it's kind of understanding that your consumers, you know, if you're wanting to have this whole kind of trajectory, if you like, of consumers, there will be the people who can buy the full pieces, but even those people will want to kind of consider it, and especially with Prada, because it's quite a sort of considered brand in every respect. But then you have to have those things that are kind of the hooks, that are the kind of the dangling bait, the kind, not exactly the low-hanging fruit, but that's the kind of idea. So I don't think it demeans the rest of the collection.
That's interesting. So. It does put more pressure on the show though, because then the show becomes, you know, people have always said that the shows are kind of like advertising tools, they're a form of PR, but it does put more pressure on the show being something that consumers actively want to watch and see.
Yeah.
And I want to pick your brains on this, Nick, because obviously you just worked with Tom Ford on his spring-summer show, which wasn't a show, it was a beautiful fashion film featuring, it was kind of a fashion film come music video come catwalk show. It was kind of an amazing piece of work. But obviously Tom Ford has also, you know, when that Burberry announcement came, well, actually before the Burberry announcement came, had made the point that he is going to start doing selling straight away. And would you say that the way that he chose to do a fashion show was a very innovative way of kind of getting his work out there to more people?
Yes, it was certainly a new direction. I mean, other people have tried it. This goes back sort of for a while. People have been trying different formulas to try and work out what to do. I mean, you know, it starts for us back in sort of Plato's Atlantis days with Alexander McQueen, who's one of the first people in a sort of major way to sort of say, okay, let's turn the show into a televised spectacle. Let's get through to sort of 3 million people rather than 300 people.
Yeah.
And that starts to change the game very completely. I thought what Tom did was interesting. It was well honed, as most things with Tom. It was based on a Soul Train kind of riff thing that, you know, you had basically a mini catwalk of people looking fantastic and dancing or moving up and down a catwalk. So it's a very similar sort of model to a catwalk. And it worked very well. You got millions and millions of views automatically. You know, Tom hasn't told me the sales figures and why they relate, but more people saw his show from that than I guess, you know, probably any other show he's done. I mean, that was a major sort of public thing. So that's a version of this. I think there's two versions going on. There seems to be the sort of spectacle version, like the Burberry show, where lots of people still go to one place and it becomes more and more public, which is sort of the Plato's Atlantis version. And then there's the other version, which is a Gareth Pugh or Tom Ford, funny bedfellows, but Gareth Pugh and Tom Ford version, which is where you bypass the show completely and you create a film. It's really interesting, and the selling from the show or from the film is also really interesting. You know, now we've got software on Show Studio where you can touch the film and buy an item. It'll take you straight to the web.
Not on Show Studio yet.
Not on Show. Coming up on Show Studio. Sorry, I
As
jumped
the
the
site
gun.
crashes.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anything you see on a Friday, you can buy. No, so that technology is there. You can go through a fashion film and you can just buy from the fashion film.
Yeah. And not just buy, like, get information about the products and stuff, which is, it's like...
Or share the images or whatever it is, so it becomes much more interactive in that way. So I think there are two really super different and both very exciting things. Which will work better for commerce, which is what will drive it, is hard to say.
Do you know what I think is interesting about that as well, is that it you know, in terms of thinking, you know, there will be things for industry, there will be things for consumers. Of course, you know, you can buy the products, but the idea of buying the ambience of the show and the kind of lifestyle, so whether you're buying the soundtrack or the makeup tips, or, you know, buying into an editor's kind of running commentary, you know, whatever they're talking about, I think there's a whole other angle for brands to sort of monetize that aspect, which is not necessarily a bad thing if it helps fuel creativity on the other side of it. So
definitely.
I was just going to say there are two terms that are being used a lot this month and this season: buy now, wear now, and see now, wear now, and they're actually quite different. See now, wear now, I think, really focuses on the show as a spectacle and the idea of watching the Burberry show on live stream or in person and then being able to buy it immediately. Buy now, wear now is the idea of seasonality, which Burberry have also looked at by now, proclaiming that the seasons are February and September.
Yeah.
We've done the same to become more global and appeal to the global consumer. We're now naming after an emblem from the collection, so we're no longer using spring, summer, autumn, winter. And that buy now, wear now concept is the idea that it's no more coats in August, but you're selling for the right time of year.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because that idea, it's interesting what you say, that idea of kind of buy now, wear now. My concern with that is there's a lot of the criticism of all of this plans is that it's kind of fueling fast fashion, and buy now, wear now is kind of like that. It's like you wear it for the season and then you don't wear it anymore. And it's interesting in a way because as much people think of Prada as like the ultimate luxury, you know, intellectual fashion, those collections are incredibly seasonal. And because of that, they are relatively, you know, they are quite time sensitive. If you see a woman wearing Prada, it's quite easy to identify the seasons. It's not like the Gucci model, which we were talking about, where it's kind of like, you know, the pieces build up and you're buying into a whole aesthetic. With Prada, you buy into one season. So in a way, I think they would really suit that thing of buy now, wear now. I want to get your take on it because another criticism, a lot of people have made the point of like, what does this do to magazines? You know, what's their role going to be? And what's kind of the British Vogue response to it all?
Oh my God, I don't know if I can say on behalf of the magazine. More now, I'll give you some of my thoughts. I'll tell you some of my personal thoughts.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because shopping habits are relatively unpredictable still.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about the Prada pieces or the much vetted, you know, Vetements look. These are buzz pieces. And there are certain things which are created in a limited edition which lend themselves very easy to the buy now, wear now format.
Yeah.
But on the other side of the spectrum, the Vogue woman, you know, she curates a wardrobe of luxury pieces. There's consideration in there. There's much more than this snappy person who's going to look on Instagram and making a decision from that moment to invest. So it is interesting. I mean, for me, it mirrors a debate around when people were switching to buying online.
Yeah.
I think there's certain things which we're getting our head around now, which will click into place and will make sense. One thing I think is interesting about, obviously Burberry seems to have headlined this new idea, and from what I can see on their website, it seems to be buy now, get later with the bags. There's a delivery time of up to 12 weeks.
But then in September it's going to be immediate.
It's going to be immediate,
But do you know what? I think there's something in that as well, because I think a possible answer to this is almost the kind of wish listing idea.
Yeah.
Because if you look at what's happening in retail elsewhere, even between brands trying to reconcile how they understand what's happening in their online stores and in their physical stores, it's all about being able to aggregate what people are loving online, what people are they loving in store. But it's mainly about the real reason for doing it is allowing people to hold on to things, because most people, a bit like with magazines, 50% of the stuff you see you just forget about. So if you have some sort of tool, and I think with this, because that will also allow people to do that thing, as you say, to curate things, because A, they're expensive, and B, it's just the mode of shopping for that type of luxury product. You aren't necessarily going to buy it all instantly, but if you can keep hold of these things. And really interestingly, there's a really big mega brand, luxury brand, I can't say who they are, that a technologist told me they're thinking, because obviously most brands think in a very siloed way, it's about their brand. You know, we all know very few people, unless they're massive brand fans, shop head to toe in one brand, It's about lots of brands.
Yeah.
So this particular, it's a really big luxury fashion brand that's thinking about creating some kind of e-tool that will allow you to kind of choose looks from their catwalk, other people's catwalks, and actually merge them together. Just
So the
basically,
combination.
acknowledging
No,
that that's the reality of the way people do things. So almost creating a sense of loyalty by saying, we get what you're like, and we're not going to pretend that we're in this kind of ivory tower with it. But of course, the upshot would hopefully be that you would go to them first. So it's pretty shrewd, but I think it's that kind of wish listing and profiling and kind of keeping hold of things. If that becomes easier, that will probably be the route. It'll keep luxury feeling like luxury, because you can totally understand why there's a resistance to buying everything now. It's just it doesn't puts you into the same kind of bracket as the high street in some ways. So.
I think
You go first. I forgot what I was going to say actually. I think it is interesting though when you look at the triggers to this new shift. There's the idea of seasonality, and there's the idea of consumers becoming impatient and there being a market for that instant purchase. What I noticed through the show, you know, we're midway through the fashion month now, and what I've noticed is that as you were watching the autumn winter 16 shows, you sensed summeriness. There was a lightness that prevailed throughout the collections. Trends that we saw, you know, in the spring summer 16 season have really spilled over. Really,
Definitely,
light stripes and light jackets and a lot of bare legs and this sort of this real sense of warmth to the collection that I think is tuning into this mood of, you know, hitting refresh on our ideas of seasonality in general. So there is that natural adaptation that's happening to the clothes themselves that are referencing us reinterpreting seasonality in general.
Well, seasonality has to change. Now we're a global sort of communication. So when the shows go out, they go out globally. So it makes no sense to go for sort of European, North American seasonality when you're selling to kind of China and to Russia and to Brazil all at the same time. So you had to lose seasonality. It's because you're talking immediately to a global audience.
Exactly, and in a single collection, it's now very likely that you see a heavy shearling, light shirting, a very short evening dress that would look like a summer evening dress. There really is this sort of top to bottom year-round approach.
Definitely.
That I think is really interesting. But another big thing I think about shopping from the buzz perspective is that luxury retailers would in theory be hedging their bets against discounted sale. You look at the really big impact on My Teresa, holding, really slashing their product at the end of a season. And we still love those pieces. It comes to the close of a season, women still want to buy that piece that's a luxury statement. Are we now, are consumers tuned in to the reality that they can hold back and get it for cheaper, something that they still love?
Which is a particular issue for Prada because, of course, it would seem a bit counterintuitive to have stores in places like Bicester, etc. And and that's been a potentially big problem for them, hasn't it? Exactly as you're saying, cannibalising their main sales. Which is undoubtedly why they must be doing this.
I want to go back to a point that you made, Nick, which I thought was interesting about this division between the way that these shows as spectacles are happening, and I wonder, you kind of asked this yourself, like, when it's a show like the Tom Ford one where it becomes almost like an alternative to a catwalk show, where it's a film or some other kind of more artistic work, I don't know. I'm interested to get your opinion because we were talking about it, who you're saying street style images for you actually do better than catwalk images in terms of shifting product. Do we think consumers like shopping from a catwalk show? Is there something in their psyche that makes them feel like that is luxury? Would they find it more difficult to directly shop from something that looks more like, as you said, like a Soul Train type bit? Do you think there is something in that, or is that whole idea that people like looking at a runway image and making a purchase off that, is that going to move away? Because if you speak to buyers, they do. If you speak to someone from Harvey Nichols or Selfridges or what have you, they say that people do come into the stores and they like having a catwalk image, and actually a lot of the concessions talk about they'll have the catwalk images there, and that helps people
it's
buy.
The purest vision. It's the purest version of the designer's vision. You look at Gucci, the show that happened yesterday, and it's laden down with pieces, and it's the girl, it's the moment, it's the runway, it's the colours all around her. Or if it's a concept film, it's the pure
But I
vision.
wonder if you put Glenn Luchford's film for Gucci, the fashion film, online with that technology where you can buy immediately from that, or you put a film of the Gucci catwalk show online, which you could buy from, which people would engage with more, whether it is more of that real life type person, in a film moving, or whether it's a model walking down the runway.
I think it's about timeline, because Fashion Week, there is that, each designer has their 20-minute moment where all eyes are on that brand, and the release of a fashion film, for example, might not have that same buzz around it that is undeniable, simply through the power of the hashtag MFW. For us, one of the big reasons we decided to change our business model is consumers both in attendance at the show, because we've always really tried to value our VIP customers. We've got really loyal customers because I think our brand it's got a very strong DNA, and they really do shop with us every season. And also through people seeing the shows on style.com. We get a lot of requests in the following day saying, I want this look, and they didn't understand that they couldn't have it for 6 months. I want it for a wedding next month, and I want this look for an opera the following month. And there was just increasing frustration because we always tried to convey that anything was possible from the team, because you have to if your product is priced at a luxury level. And they were just frustrated, and by the time it did arrive in 6 months, they'd moved on to the next thing half the time. And I don't think that that's... I don't think it's to do with that kind of millennial attitude of you need it now. I think it's simply because if a brand is putting as much marketing behind a show as all of them do, it confuses the consumer more often than not. So for us, it's very refreshing to feel like you're focused on one thing, and that's speaking to the consumer, and that's what you're marketing.
We found through our e-commerce site that if you do get somebody wearing something we stock, it just, if you get Kanye West stepping out in a hoodie that we're stocking or whatever it is, it just sells out straight away. 300 go out in a day. I mean, it's sort of, it's gone. ASAP Rocky wears a belt. It's gone. So that sort of power of the sort of celebrity endorsement is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's why I wonder if you'll start seeing, because the catwalk shows have become like fashion films in themselves, the way they're filmed and art directed. But I wonder if you'll start seeing those, and then the brands that aren't. Well, maybe the brands that are doing the buy straight away thing. So when the Burberry, they'll do their catwalk show and they're hoping that everyone will buy stuff, and then. Next few weeks they'll release a short film with one of their, Burberry kids, one of those cool young actors or actresses, where you can buy from that as well, and whether we'll start seeing more of this kind of moving content.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a splintered aspect to this as well. I think for different types of consumers, different demographics, and lots of brands now, it's much kind of less one size fits all. It's quite difficult even to talk about well, I think, for your brand, you've got a really specific customer base, and you know them super well. It's not so much the same for some of these other brands, especially when you're talking across continents, So I think that, and it makes sense. It's actually really exciting to have those different components, as long as there's a kind of a thread running through them all that's really smartly directed. That actually is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges. Is if all of a sudden, that's been a challenge for retail for a while, to have all these different platforms and have them not only each of those platforms having a kind of synchronicity, but actually literally linking up. So one platform kind of knows when another platform is doing something else, and having it, feeding it.
Because it's going to have to be a long-term thing. If you think of the way traditional advertising worked, you'd have the show and then you'd place a print advert, and that would run throughout the season to shift the product and get people excited about the product. So I do think this notion of streaming a catwalk show and hoping that immediately just the buzz around that is going to be enough to shift your product. I wonder if
it needs to be constant, not constant, but dips throughout the year, regular hype throughout the year, whether it's that you have decided to seed one dress to 50 bloggers and they're all going to get street styled that week, or you're going to have a dinner with VIPs another week. We can't just focus on this biannual thing anymore. We've moved to 6 capsule collections rather than 4 collections. And again, it's not because I think there is the view that customers have this kind of insatiable appetite for fashion, and that makes it quite fast fashion, and people look down on that. I don't think it's so much that. They're actually quite small capsules, but it's just to keep the interest there, because there does need to be freshness.
And I think with it might be that designers start saying, okay, let's look at our collection, let's look at, we're going to release these will be the buy now. These will be the things you can get in 3 weeks. These will be the month-long things. And it might be that actually it's the marketing that coincides really smartly with that will actually, maybe, if you're a consumer and you say you sign up to watch a show on a live screen show, you will then say, I'm really interested in this product, and you'll keep getting little updates of information, and maybe it'll say, it's coming in a week, now it's coming in 3 days, it's here, boom, you can buy from this video. And of course that video could be the video of the original catwalk, or it could be that in the meantime there was a video that Nick shot with them, or Glenn Luchford video. So I think it's a bit of a panic time, because obviously for marketeers and the production cycle, it makes it more complicated, but obviously it's always super exciting. Anything in a transition phase makes it.
And what does this mean for the show itself? Because for a long time I think people talked as if the fashion show was kind of maybe going to disappear and it wasn't relevant anymore, and I wonder if what all of this has done is actually given a new way for the fashion show to continue to exist, but a very different kind of fashion show. Maybe it is a fashion show that actually there was no one sitting at. You almost think it's going to get to the point where brands stage a fashion show but just kind of film it really beautifully, and because it feels like these fashion shows have to be more for the public. Like, I wonder what's going to happen. What's the future?
What's the future? The fashion show is not just a fashion show, though. You've got the celebrity contingent sitting front row. You've got the social media happening through editors backstage, or through the the superstar hairstylist. There's all these different components
and assets that come out of that.
Exactly. After a show takes place, you have the runway images instantly. Well, the first thing you have is the hashtag of the people witnessing it. Then the runway images come in. Then you have the celebrities doing, the step and repeat boards. And there's this sort of all these different layers. So when we were talking a short while ago about the influence of a street style image over a runway image, the draw of the show is that you get a lot of that together.
But I wonder, is that speaking enough to people who will buy? Because I agree with you, when you're there, or even during Fashion Week, especially when you work in fashion, that seems to be everywhere. You think, no one could have missed that the Burberry show just took place. But it's interesting I keep picking on the Tom Ford example, but going back to that, it was Gaga, it was Lucky Blue, it was enough people that it was like everywhere. Whereas I wonder, if you're not in the fashion bubble, whether you do realise as much all this stuff is happening.
The models are changing though. At Gucci yesterday you had the artist Petra Collins.
Yeah.
So she speaks to a totally
different audience.
Different audience, and I was very excited to see her because I'm a big fan of her work. But it's really interesting that that she appeared in that show. And she walked in it rather than just sitting on the front row. I think that's what's interesting. Exactly.
That's even more of a kind of...
And, Gaga at Marc Jacobs, it's this, it's the sort of curation, the casting is becoming incredibly important because it's those people that have their own sort of the satellite hype that feeds into the show. But
going back to what you were saying about the celebrity aspect, whoever we're referring to as those celebrities, I think that level of, there are a significant number of people who want to see who was at the show and get more of the kind of the insider information, as it were, because obviously we've never really had such a sense of having what we believe is a dialogue with a brand via social media. Whether that's a kind of semi-fictional dialogue, it doesn't really matter. I think there's that appetite for that, and so there's a hell of a lot of people that want to see. Well, it creates all the peripheral stuff. Does create that sense of that brand DNA as well now. So like you say, it's the casting, it's the who's on the front row, it's all those things are so significant to that now.
The pressure is to make your fashion show relevant. I think within the industry we know the schedule of what's happening, exactly as you said. We're here, we know when the show's going to land, but the trick is to pull together a group that brings in wider popular appeal, so that everybody knows about it.
What would you like to see happen with the fashion show? Because it's interesting talking about fashion film, because obviously you started Show Studio to champion fashion film, and now fashion films, like the Runway show, is a fashion film.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting sort of development from it. I think we're also ignoring what the designer wants, because we're talking a lot from the consumer's point of view, but the designers are the artists who fuel this. And you talk to a lot of designers, they want very different things out of this. Talk to Gareth Pugh, he wants a fashion film because it shows his clothes better. And that's something you hear lots of people say, you have to be at the show to see the clothes. That's not true. Often the show you really can't see the clothes. And also, if you have a great fashion filmmaker, like you have a great fashion photographer, they'll show the clothes better than anything else. So that we're sort of waiting for the talent if you want to catch up with that. But I remember having a conversation with J.W. Anderson here at Show Studio. We were saying, I get so frustrated by the way my collections are bought. So the buyers tend to err, not all buyers, but some of the buyers, a lot of buyers, tend to err on the side of caution, because of course they've got to justify to their bosses why they bought 300 sweaters by one designer. So he's saying, but that is a complete misrepresentation of my show. It's being sort of completely distorted through buying. So if you've got to a situation where actually it's the public buying, that gives a much, much better a feedback to the designer of how his collections are being received.
Topshop actually, it was quite a while ago, I forget the season, but they did something that was kind of super ahead of its time, where when you could watch the show coming down the runway, and it was before Buy Now, Wear Now. But as it was coming down, you could choose what colours you wanted to see it in, and in a way, it was just an exercise in kind of
market research.
Complete market research. Like I think about Periscope and the way that works, and you can like the video as it's coming, you get the flurry of hearts. And I was thinking actually super smart to do a catwalk show completely on Periscope, because you can measure the peak bits that people engage
count
with.
Those hearts.
The hearts. But it's interesting to think. I wonder if the increase. I wonder how much people are actually looking at their live streams and treating them not just as a marketing exercise, but as a kind of consumer research exercise, and thinking, like, do brands
It's the comments. Where I imagine you'll find this. It's seeing the comments. If afterwards you sit, it's almost because it's like watching consumer reviews.
Yeah.
And of course, people will be much more critical because I mean, even sitting here, we'll have to restrain. Well, we probably won't actually. No, on this panel we wouldn't. But there are lots of other places in fashion journalism where you have to be a little bit careful about what you say, and you kind of temper yourself. That's like no holds barred.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have to. It's skewed because maybe you don't care what everyone's saying. You know, just because someone has an opinion doesn't mean it's worth. One opinion is not necessarily the same as another opinion. But it's really interesting to be able to watch that and get really honest, non-focus group based
because it's so
contrived
smart
feedback.
what you said about like the item, those key items. Because if you think how those key items happen, whether it's a Vetements hoodie or what have you, they happen straight away. Like it's almost like kind of. You don't think about it; just kind of seeps into everyone's mind.
Mind stuff.
It is, but like the show will happen, and those pieces of the season emerge kind of out of nowhere. And I was trying to work out where they come from, and it is in a way people posting them loads on social, or like someone really great wearing one,
or they become a thing because you want the brand.
Yeah,
you want the brand, so you will look on a shopping site, won't say which one specifically, and you want to buy into a piece of that aesthetic. That's happened in Paris that day in that Chinese restaurant, and it happens to be a £325 sweater that maybe you can blow your budget on and you'll wear it every day. What I'm interested to see with the show we're about to watch is what Mrs. Prada has decided is her handbag style that is the one that's going to sell now.
Yeah.
Because the confidence of looking at a collection, and I found this very interesting with Burberry, is that the show's starting.
No, keep going.
Was that there was quite a bold coat, the fringe coat.
Yeah.
That isn't for everybody. It's an art piece, but they've hedged their bets. That's what people want now.
Yeah. Here we are at Prada. So just to give a bit of background, because I was at the men's show and the women's show. She's very, very much presents them as the women's and men's show. And there's a lot of carry on from like the sailor theme was very present at the men's show. The makeup on the girls is the same as the girls on the that were on that men's runway, to the point where when this first started I was very worried that we were watching the wrong show because it looks very similar. Also, this is fascinating. I want to get your opinion on this, Nick. Loads and loads of Burberry using the slow-mo.
Yeah. But it's just the skill of the cinematographer getting more advanced, which is quite interesting. I don't particularly want to talk all over the beginning of the Prada show. But when Prada first started live streaming, their shows were almost unwatchable.
Yeah,
all live streams were unwatchable.
It was pretty bad. Yeah. But they've got better and better and better. But there's still, if you look at this isn't even as, this could go so much further.
Yeah.
You could actually get a place designed where you could film the clothes so you could really see them, and filmed by a kind of great fashion filmmaker.
And flip to the girl backstage before she's about to come out, scanning up the look. I know.
But that's what was
interesting. This is still a compromise, isn't it, between sort of catwalk photography and something. You've got the detail of the shoes, you've got the slow-mo, but they're just beginning to actually get a language of
But it's the language of
film.
catwalk photography, isn't it?
It is at the moment, and that language isn't particularly great.
No, definitely not. Like, even with streams, you don't see the back. So, like, they do a quick scan over the model walking away. But Plato's Atlantis was interesting, wasn't it? Because obviously it was a long time ago. But the cameras were, like, literally on the runway. So it was almost like the stream was a part of the show rather than a kind of way of documenting.
Exactly. Whereas here, you've got the locking of the horns between a theatre spectacle happening in Milan, very dark, the audience set and seated, and then the live stream. It really is. They're two very different things.
But you wouldn't really be able to shop from this, if we're honest. And I think the industry have been... Live streaming when it launched was so exciting, but it was difficult. Nobody's really actually for a while known the purpose of it in a lot of ways. And particularly when I think it struggled at the beginning because it was only from one angle, which meant that it didn't convey it properly. And I don't think a consumer, it'd be quite difficult to know immediately from that one shot that you wanted to buy.
I guess that's what they're trying to do with this pan up
with
and down.
the slow down and the slow-mo.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been someone actually from Instagram, and they were saying the most popular videos on Instagram are slow-mo videos.
They're the ones that just like have a little bit, like a little shake, like shiver, basically. Yeah, it's incredible.
Because it's you that told me that.
Might have been.
Someone told me.
Yeah, quite possibly. We were thinking
really
about
checked
it
my facts here.
And it's the indulgence of having slow-mo. You're looking at a small picture on a small screen. Slow-mo feels like it seduces.
Yeah.
I think this is interesting because I'm looking at the bags. There's the interesting sort of choker bag happening, and then the carry, the handheld bag, and they're very dark. And this is what I was curious about, because if you want something to say "buy me," it has to leap out at you.
Was that thing of no one buys black online and everyone buys print? That's what I'm interested in, because I think it's really clever how you equated it to kind of the selling online thing. This kind of selling from the stream thing is, what how is it actually going to change design? Because when everyone started selling online, it was like you have to do print, you have to do colour, you have to do very surface led, and now selling straight from the catwalk, you think, how is that going to affect design even more?
Do you think, but there'll probably be sort of, Nick will probably know loads more about this, I'm sure, but the sort of technical issues, Nick will know all about this, I'll pass over to him in a second. The kind of technical aspects that we're just talking about Snowmo, but surely there'll come a time where actually we could rewatch this show and we could probably watch it from several different angles, that even 5 of us could have a different experience.
That time's really here already. Actually, the technology's been here for years, to be honest.
If you think even Sky TV, you can pause it and rewind it straight away. Like, you don't get any of that.
But that idea that I could be following this model and be watching her dress, and actually the next one, and I could still be following the next one.
Also,
one of you is
it needs to be at that level if you're and I'm sure Burberry's will be if you're
to part with a couple of thousand.
Exactly.
It can't just be a video. You're right. It has to feel like, as because e-commerce platforms have got so good at giving as much information as possible, from fabric, hair, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't see how they can expect people to buy things straight away if you can't hover your mouse over a bag and it go X leather, this is the hardware,
the sizing,
the size available
and
in this
probably
colour.
other sort of more contextual information as well. So if there's a particular coat, actually you'd probably, there'll be plenty of people that want to know, well, historically, where does this fit in the sort of pantheon of Prada coats? What was it referencing? That stuff's all super seductive as well.
Some beautiful.
It's felt very singular in its look. Last season your mind cast back to this sort of Pan Am, very square suiting in the bold stripes, and you think Prada last season stripes. And what I really felt was the sort of shockwave coming through this season is shows so densely packed with many different ideas that you see two you see two looks from the same show and they could be an entirely different collection, and that's what feels like is resonating through here. We saw beautiful sort of translucent, very ethereal tea dresses, and then suddenly you've got a worked cardigan, you've got all these different lengths going on, and the corseting, there's lots and lots of different things happening.
There's the freeze frame.
Freeze frame. I know, looking at that gorgeous.
And
I don't think that's intentional.
Fantastic for there to be that wealth of ideas, because their sales have flatlined for the last 2 years. It was announced last week that things weren't looking great, and so how brilliant that it seems like, from your perspective, they're pushing things forward.
And the last show felt quite impenetrable, didn't
totally
it, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, you either bought, as you said, you either bought into that or you didn't. And actually, it was fairly difficult to buy into.
It was in a season full of fluidity and sort of supersized femininity. It really stood out. And I think for the die-hard Prada fans, there was plenty of things there that would look fantastic. And also in an ageless way, it was a very... it tuned into a sort of broader market. It didn't necessarily give the most youthful vision of the season, but is Prada supposed to be fashionable in that tick-boxing trend way? I don't think it is.
I think it's interesting because the men's show got rave reviews, and I think it was because it managed to marry, as you say, that kind of idea of a concept around the show that was very much kind of one train of thought, but there was so much stuff, and there was a joyfulness to that as well, and an amazing collaboration. I think from what I can see that it's the same artist. It's Christoph Schemin. I might be getting this wrong, but it looks the same, and he did those amazing illustration type prints in the menswear. And when they looked almost like a historical sort of painting or picture. And when you got up close, he does this amazing work where he brings together, say, it can be anything from sort of 5 to 10 different emblems or visuals from, it can be ancient art right through to film, and merges them into one. So he did a painting called like The Important Ones, which had Nina Simone in it and then Freud, and it looked like a historical painting. So it's very much about kind of mishmashing and referencing. It looks like the prints have made a reappearance in this, and that felt like a very apt thing to do. It's very much about the mishmashing of references, the mishmashing of eras, but they were like a Prada showpiece. But then alongside it, there was you know, also just amazing coats and really beautiful.
But that's the big thing, because buying just the bag, would you feel like you had got the concept of the show? I feel like this is, you know, it's so rich in ideas and mood for this top to toe look. There is so much lush, really fabulous,
beautiful,
you know, really, really beautiful clothes, and this concept of this woman. Is the bag enough? Really? I don't feel like if I was wearing just the bag with my jeans, that would give me the look of this fantastic Prada woman.
Because one thing that's the clearest to me is the layering, and that it's layered on top, on top, on top. You're hardly going to get that from the bag.
But it's interesting though when you say, because when you think of Prada, you do think to an extent relatively kind of it's that awkwardness, and to a degree, I know she loves embellishment sometimes, but you think of these relatively kind of there's almost like a severity to some Prada things, whereas, and it's very much about the piece, you know, the amazing Prada dress, the amazing Prada skirt, whereas this, it's kind of that Gucci model of like you can buy into the look, you can get the look, like you could kind of. It's almost like that thing, if you don't actually need to buy it, you can kind of buy into it by recreating it. And I think it's interesting that the cluttered nature of this kind of speaks to that. What do we think of kind of the meat and potatoes of the collection? I can't get over that slow-mo, it's freaking me out. I don't like it.
You know, I really like there's almost a sense of, you know, there's always this kind of sort of slightly political kind of activist, you know, even the way that some of the bags were kind of slung. It's sort of quite
artillery belt.
Yeah, it's quite militant, and I love the fact that she does that with you know, a slight semblance of the kind of old lady dressing that, you know, Gucci are doing as well this season. I always like that it mixes that sort of really kind of the heritage, the kind of almost ridiculously lavish heritage of Italy, with something that feels quite hardcore and quite, as you say, severe in some ways. I think that's brilliant.
It's interesting, the bags are quite different for Prada. If you think Prada has not really had like you know, they do great leather goods, but they don't do it bags. You can't think, it's not like a Vuitton or a Gucci where new Gucci where everyone's obsessed, but these bags are a lot more worked and they're a lot more playful, I think. I mean, I think part of that, you know, when they did the bunny bags, like with all the logos, that felt like, you know, they were staking their claim for an it bag. And looking at this, every look there's a bag, and they are quite young. They're not kind of classic bags.
The neck bags especially.
Yeah.
You know, the choker bags. It is interesting though. I think a Prada dress with that, you know, that hints to a sort of 40s silhouette with a high neckline that's just so beautifully cut that you could wear anywhere is a fantastic Prada dress. I feel like there is this standalone image, you know, the kind of opera coat. There's always something like that, which is your in-store moment of trying it on, spinning round, feeling fantastic, and, you know, lusting after it, you know, really wanting that piece and interacting and feeling it.
I love that about the shows though. I love that thing about, actually, if we talk, some of the things we've been talking about, the things we could look at, even if you can get to the stage where you can look at something, you know, every single angle you can possibly imagine, you can wish list, you can do whatever, it will drive people back to the stores that they do have at some stage, theoretically as well, because, you know, there are those people that can't get to those stores, but there's a huge thing about, you know, the pilgrimage that people will make to stores, but when they can see more of these things online.
Awful lot of people who can't make it to the stores.
For those people as well. But I think, you know, if you can't, and it might be that you know, you're saving up for ages and you get to that place. I think there are lots of different spots this could hit in future. But
I just think it is about the way it's presented. I was at the men's shows. Chris Van Ash at the Dior show did quite an interesting thing where the clothes that appeared on the runway he had filmed in a fashion film by Willy van der Peer that screened on the back, and then the catwalk happened and the models came out in those same clothes and there was a film of them behind. And I thought that was very clever. It wasn't exactly to my taste, but I thought it was a more interesting example than the way that this is being filmed, because you want a sense of narrative and story, and the filming just looks too producty. You know, you wouldn't do an ad campaign that looks, you know, there's ad campaigns where it's like the bag right in front of the camera and the shoes, and everyone is apathetic towards those, and everyone kind of knows that language. And I feel like very quickly this is going to look too commercial. The film is going to need to feel more.
It needs to step up again.
There needs to be a stronger dialogue with the shopper or the viewer even.
Well, it's what we were saying just now about you want to hover your mouse and find out about each piece and the story behind it. That needs to be conveyed in all aspects of marketing. There is this appetite now to know to know more and to see. I think
Yeah.
particularly because people can't make it to stores, like Nick says, so you need to find that information directly from the brand.
I mean, really, as a consumer, you'd probably want to have the review not kind of the day afterwards. You'd want to have an editor, have Tim Blanks review it beforehand and have it as it's going around. So
exactly, the
actually,
preview system, though, I believe that when we were talking earlier about, the interaction between print and the switching the timings of the shows, it's the preview, the style of preview that the top tier of editors enjoy will flourish. There will probably be a really enhanced dialogue between the designers and the top editors, rather than having the big reveal. There will be a different,
Because that's what Tom Ford did before he released the video to the public. He released it to Anna Wintour and whoever else, his top 5 people he wanted to see it. So it was only a matter of hours.
I think, in a way, the role of the editor has never been kind of more important than it is here, and things that can help you contextualise these things.
I think it's just going to be redefined. It is really exciting. Like I was talking about this the other day in terms of criticism, and how a lot of people are saying that buy now, wear straight away. It's going to damage fashion criticism, and I think all it's going to damage is criticism that only speaks to the industry. Because actually, if you think of the role of fashion critic traditionally, it was to kind of explain the stories of the collection and not translate, but in a way, translate what a designer's vision was and offer that up to the public, and to an element that involved giving information about what to buy, and saying what was good and what was relevant. And it's only, I think, quite recently that this idea of the reviews are written and, it's only the industry that reads them and no one really cares. But actually, because if you're writing a review of something that is available in store, it gives you an enormous kind of privilege, but also ability to speak to people and actually inform their choice.
Do you remember there was the Row panel we did, and Sharmadean Reid was saying, she said, the minute that she wants something, the first thing she'll do is she'll kind of go, okay, let's look at the hashtags. I want to see other people wearing it. I want to see reviews of it. And I think it's actually all those things. It's, okay, I want a couple of opinions. Maybe I want a friend's opinion. I certainly want an expert opinion. I'd like the context behind it. I want to have a bit of a think about what other things I might be able to wear this with. All of those things are going to be brilliant. I mean, with my sort of journalist hat on, I think it's exciting. It's not. I don't think it's a moment for sort of panic or the death of
also
that aspect.
The idea that the ad campaigns they use the best talent in the industry to put a really entrancing perspective on something you can buy, and if they happen, if they are released a month or 2 months after the show, surely that reinforces the idea that you're buying into a long-term vision.
What I think will happen is you'll get that talent used during the show.
Exactly, and it should happen. It's a good sort of continual reveal and relationship.
How much I love the Prada collection, which we should go on to talk about. I did think that the cinematography was really mundane, very, 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 boring, basically. And was actually, it really missed something there. They should be having great visual minds show their shows. They've got great architecture, they've got great styling, the clothes are amazing and beautiful, and I thought that was a particularly lovely collection. But they're just not making it live. It's like putting out a magazine that's got kind of boring shots in it. If you're going to do a show, you're going to make it live, you're going to make everybody watch it. In that case, rise to the challenge of it. And do incredible cinematography.
I agree with you. It is strange that the ad campaign, obviously they get the best photographers and, every brand, they will stake all of their kind of big creative collaborative power on that ad campaign, whether it's working with Stephen Meisel or, Prada working with Stephen Meisel, or Loewe working with Stephen Meisel, or Gucci, Glenn Luchford, whatever you have, but you wouldn't see Glenn Luchford art directing the stream of the Gucci show. But you think how fascinating.
That's
they
what's
need to
happening,
start.
That's when
that way.
Topshop got me to do the thing on Saturday,
Which I loved.
Thank you. And I'm doing it.
No, I really loved.
McQueen got in me to do the Place Atlantis. Tom Ford did that.
But do you think, I don't want to seem rude, but do you think people get used to it because they think of you as like a techie mind and like a film person rather than just a photographer?
I think they get me to do it because they think that I'll know how to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody thinks I'm a particularly techie mind.
No, but I can't imagine someone getting like a McQueen asking Dave Sims to do it. You think of him as a photographer.
Because you've got a generation of image makers who are now giving way to a new generation of image makers. The thing is that these people are all set in a system. Dave Sims, myself, Steve Meisel, all those guys, or all of us, were set in a print system. This is no longer a print system. This is a system that relies on live streaming, that relies on buying from the catwalk. The one thing that we haven't talked about, and we'll just shift the conversation slightly here, is the models. I worked with probably all the girls that were in the Prada show. I've worked with a lot of them on Saturday. I worked with Topshop. They're great personalities.
Yeah.
They're really alive. They're full of life. They've got loads to say, and yet they're totally underused.
Yeah.
I really don't understand why that isn't happening more on a catwalk. If we want to have more information, we want to look at that film, and we want to know about the clothing, but we also want to know about the character of the person who's wearing it. And all those girls have got great characters. It's really missing a trick. This sort of idea you send out girls like zombies, as kind of just marching down the catwalk with no identity. Of course, all those girls, they're models because they're show-offs.
Yeah.
They're all extroverts.
And that's one of the things our consumers always find so off-putting at catwalk shows. Our top customer actually emailed me after one of our shows saying, I don't think I'll attend next season. I just couldn't associate with the models on the catwalk, and they didn't look happy. I think that's become
a trend that really has to change. Because I think that's not because from any other reason, the fact they're really missing something. Those girls are fantastic. They're amazing models. They're A, beautiful, but B, they have tons of personality. And also a good model will know how to show the narrative of a piece of clothing. And with Prada, you need somebody to do that. That isn't, we're all sort of struggling slightly to be able to analyse the collection. The model has to wear it in a way that kind of gets it through. Good models can do that.
Do you think the only reason they might not do that at this stage is because they worry about it, sort of suspension of disbelief? That because when they sort of set up because at the end, they were showing the kind of, like, as if they're in a kind of Venetian hotel, and it's almost like the models thinking of them as actresses, that actually they want to keep it kind of silent because they want to project the fantasy.
Consumer engage with it. Like Rosanna and I talked about this on another panel. I'm sure you can give some more information about this. This is part of the reason why street style imagery sells so much product, is because it looks, not only does it look slightly more vibrant and alive, whatever you think of the kind of street style circus, it's like if you see Mika outside the show wearing something, she looks, like her personality, and like she wanted to wear it. It's very different to seeing her in the show. But also it's that sense of like a choice have been made, like someone wanting to wear that, and it just feels like a slightly different.
I think our top traffic.
Do you disagree?
I'm going to disagree. I think the consumer, in the broader sense, is very savvy to the idea that street style bloggers get clothes, wear them, hang around for a photo opportunity, pose in a particular way against a wall that matches what they're wearing. I think we're now getting to this point where it's very easy to be satirical of the street style scene.
They do, but they see them as real women. So we find on our customer care team, when you find kind of an abandoned basket and somebody's thinking about something, the thing that will so often confirm that purchase is sending them a picture of it on a blogger, because they see that rather than a lookbook or a catwalk image, they can associate with it. It's often because it's headless, and it's because it's outside. And I think we also see this in the success of Snapchat this season, because it's fun and exciting, and it conveys the, backstage at the shows, it conveys the personality and the excitement behind the collection.
But it's kind of Snapchat,
I
don't know what. I'm so scared. I'm more skeptical when it comes to street style. Nick, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I don't really think it's that Lou was saying. I think when you see, compared to Vogue magazine, if you had pictures, and I would absolute total respect to all the people who have to go and do that, photograph that show, they're only allowed to do it in one way, but they're dull photography. If you had Vogue full of pictures that look like that, nobody would buy it. You need the expression of a great photographer or cinematographer and a great model to make people go, that piece of clothing looks amazing. That's why you pay Steve Meisel $1 squillion. Because he can make that piece. That's why Kate Moss gets paid so much money. That's why all those girls, Mika, whoever, are in such demand, because they can put on what you're wearing and they can understand it and they can make it look amazing. And my point was really that they're missing the opportunity. They have amazing models.
Which some people have played with Dior at one of the shows. I'm so bad with seasons, which is why I'm an excellent fashion journalist. But he had 4 big photographers. It was like Willy van der Peer, I'm pretty sure one of them was Terry, a couple of others backstage at the show, and they shot the girls as they were coming out, and they were much more kind of, like personality images, and they were projected as the girls were then walking out, and that's interesting. But then it's like, it's still just for those in the room.
Going back to Nick's point, I do think we were talking about bloggers on the one hand and kind of street style and the models. There is something really interesting about the models and the relationships they have with the brands, because like you said, you've worked with many of these models over and over again. Same with Prada, there will be people that are verging on the muse, and I think that aspect of it help. I do think there are instances where actually you don't necessarily want your models talking about things because you want to keep it literally like a hermetically sealed bubble where it's complete fantasy. But then if you're talking about some of the kind of backstage stuff, some of those models will understand Prada in a way that's quite difficult for other people to get
But
into
they
that
can
impenetrable
express,
world.
That's
really
it's their
interesting.
skill. That's what models are particularly good at. They can put on a piece of clothing and they can make it look desirable.
Even not necessarily through talking, through movement.
No, through
as well.
movement, through just how they stand. It's their job. You know,
Yeah.
a great model expresses a narrative in a piece of clothing.
Yeah.
Do you think that's conveyed in presentations and salon shows more? This other form of showcasing a collection at Fashion Week that people have been doing?
I don't go to many presentations. I wouldn't be able to speak on
what do
what's
you
I just did a
Do you
piece
think
today
it
actually on
has?
the power. I mean, London, a lot of London's new, very established crop of younger talent really nails the presentation
Yeah.
format. You look at Serafina of Issa Arfan and you go into a room and it's very exciting, but it's an attendee thing.
Yeah.
You know, you walk in there and you love the makeup and you snap it and it's
Like
that
immersive
interactive
theatre
element.
in a
Yeah,
way.
it
Yeah,
is.
it's
It's
like
very
Claire Barrett,
much
it's like
like
an
art.
Amelie
Goddard.
Yeah,
she's
theatre.
starting to so she's starting to allow the models to become people.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
move, they dance, and they say, you know, they're kind of bopping or they're eating their lunch during.
Yeah.
It's this sort of very lived in, very
But I do
art
think
world
there's
esque
ways to
presentation.
combine that. Like you want the show, but then you want that kind of aspect as well. I mean, one thing I really want to look at the clothes more closely, but one thing Prada did do, which we haven't talked about, probably should have talked about it before we saw the show, is they did this series of like mini films running up to the show, which kind of are the premonitions, and they kind of sort of set the tone for the presentation. That's what they were branded to. They put them on their Facebook, they had them on their website, and they talked about it as being about the show, which was about the allegory of women and the progress of nature. But these were quite interesting, but they were very kind of abstracted, and I wonder kind of.
I quite like it when Prada does this sort of stuff.
I love it because Nick and I are obsessed with this one. We talk about it all the time. They did an animation film called Trembled Blossoms for Spring Summer 2008, and it was just incredibly beautiful and bizarre.
I mean, I just like it because this is the stuff that I think you do fall in love with.
It's
You
beautiful
know?
for the sake of beautiful.
Which is perfect.
and it's incredibly
you know,
seductive
act
because you
and-
feel like you're being inducted into this secret Prada club.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Prada's appeal, it's not overt sex appeal, it's not, you know, bright blinging pieces. It's this seductive into this very cerebral club.
And there is
And it's austere. It has
Yeah.
a very
And you
austere
know what?
luxury about it.
Exactly, I totally agree, and I think it's also about things that you might watch this video 6 or 7 times and you see something
Yeah.
different, and the clothes are like that as well. They're not necessarily things you're supposed to just kind of get boom just like that. You're supposed to be able to
Well, there is
languish
a
over
difference,
them,
isn't
I
it?
think.
Because between I do agree. Part of the appeal of Prada is perhaps not understanding it, and that kind of
or not to start off with.
Yeah, and it's not
definitely.
easy. It
Yeah.
doesn't offer itself on a plate. But I think it's the balance between you don't want the show to feel too much like a commercial, and you
yeah,
know, like
exactly.
this is right there for you. But then you want it to feel as beautiful. Like it feels like whoever's edited that sat for days and days and days, and Mrs. Prada said, "No, do it like this," and it went back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
Whereas the show, you feel like all of that went into the clothes and the sets. God, they're amazing. Like that set, the men, it's just kind of. I think it's almost identical to the men's. It's quite hard to see from the stream. Is it exactly identical? So it was kind of like almost like it was based on the concept of kind of public trials or public sort of performances. So you thought of everything from kind of medieval jousting to, but it did have this strange feeling, as you said, like a bit like a hotel, a bit like this. But you thought, and it was kind of a witty statement. And they gave this press release about the set at the time. It's obviously done by Amo, who do all of Prada's sets. And they talked about it about how the fashion show has changed so much, and it is this public skeptical that is tried by those who are attending.
So fashion on trial, basically.
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was. And you
Yeah.
think all of that, it just doesn't come across, and you want there to be theatre that feels still Prada, still kind of lofty and intellectual and interesting and engaging. But you want to be able to
Are
see
those
that
brand
separately.
values compatible though?
That's what I'm interested. But I think they have to.
But
be.
then you look at the success of Pradasphere, which happened, you know, on the top floor in Harrods, and it was so magnificent, and you felt, you know, when you were in that room, you had a mixture of Italian tourists, you know, fashion industry people, but also just someone who'd read Time Out that week and heard that it was great and wanted to see it, and then you were running downstairs to go to the shop where you could buy the reissued collections.
But do you not think, I thought that was actually quite an accessible exhibition.
Definitely.
Because Pradasphere was curated in a way that it was very themed, so it was a kind of, you know, like you'd see lots of different collections tied together, so it was almost like a brief history of Prada. Like,
and it told you a story.
Such
It
a
said,
story.
here is the banana collection, here is this, and
Yeah.
you relived it. It was very joyful and celebratory,
But
but also followed a standard exhibition where you had biography, this, and it was.
But you want that language coming into the catwalk show, like, you almost want. Why don't they get an amazing fashion historian to curate something around their live stream so it goes out and they show, that as a collection that we just saw was a very historical collection. You saw it in the shapes of the sleeves, the shapes of the necklines, like this, the reference, the military wear. Get Judith Clark to sit while it comes out and do these interesting projects as they would in a retailer or in a magazine, and get her to do all the references or do a live commentary as it goes along. It's just thinking of the show and the internet as a platform to do these kind of interesting, creative, collaborative projects. But
it's like high fashion QVC.
Exactly.
But it's, I don't know.
It's a tricky one.
It's interesting what you were talking about before then in terms of...
But when Prada do the films, it's Wes Anderson, it's very much... But then you think, get Wes Anderson to direct your catwalk show. Like, how amazing would that be?
They've also only started prioritising digital quite recently compared to other brands.
And
really, because if you're thinking about the team and what they've been going through in the last 24 hours... I think because they are really...
Getting Wes in would probably be like tip them over.
Well, I think they're going to actually be thinking about wholesale and the buyers, and nobody in this whole debate is really actually mentioning the buyers that much. And I think
Prada's wholesale is...
it's minimal. Yeah. They've got now 574 retail outlets, which is a huge amount.
Yeah, and it is. I think that's another thing that's going to come out of this buy immediately thing is the brands themselves taking back the retail. Loads of younger brands.
The only way we've been able to do it is by having only one wholesale partner, Net-a-Porter, who just have a capsule, and they have the knowledge of their consumer and of what their consumer looks for from Matthew Williamson.
And they do a capsule really well.
But they have to buy from swatches and sketches really from us to be able to buy on our new schedule. They can't. We aren't able to.
There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of trust. Is a young designer going to have, going to be able to build that same relationship? That's a very trusted relationship. What I find interesting though about Prada with the see now buy now thing is that in order to sell something to someone, like you were saying about having a sort of instant critique of the show or something happening, is you have to give away a lot of information about a mood and the product to be able to sell it to someone on the spot. There has to be the pitch. And do they want to give that away? Because for Prada, it feels to me like you have the inkling, you see something, it's interpreted, it's a more gradual flow. Are they going to be willing to give up that information on the spot on the references?
Do it in a Prada way. I completely agree. Yeah, part of the appeal is the mystery. But then do something like, as we said, get an amazing filmmaker to direct your show. That way you're not having to, get Mrs. Prada herself standing there with a microphone telling you all the inspirations. Like, that would work for someone like Jeremy Scott, or something like that. But I think it's about getting across the ethos of that collection visually, which is what Miss Prada does so well. You look at the collections and it's the immediate visual imagery.
And you look at Jürgen Teller photographing Louis Vuitton's collections on the location and it appearing, but that at the moment is an industry thing. You receive this amazing sort of new next generation lookbook, and it's really draws you into the show and the mood of it. And you see brands stepping up, someone taking over their Instagram or taking over their Snapchat, and I think it's exactly what you were saying about it's that merger. It's the person who's doing the campaign being brought into the fold at the point when you deliver.
Because I think these collaborative relationships feel very current. I think that's part of the appeal of Vetements and that whole scene at the moment is you think of Vetements and you think of the friendship with Gosha and the fact that Gosha walked in the show and Lotta styles Gosha and she also styles Vetements. You think of it as a group and it feels very authentic. And part of what feels so authentic about that is they work together on everything. So if there's a Vetements special, Lotta will have styled it or Lotta will be present in it. And it's kind of the same thing that J.W. Anderson does so well, both at his own label but at Loewe, is it's always, Jamie Hawksworth or Stephen Meisel, M.M. Paris, Michelle Gobert, doing the music. It feels like a group of people. So it feels very creatively authentic. And, Jamie shoots a lookbook at the Loewe presentation when you go see it, and MM have done the space, but they'll also work on the ad campaigns. And that's what I mean in terms of it shouldn't be the case that brand does a show, then the photographer shoots the campaign. You want to feel like there are these creative teams and these constant collaborations.
There is transparency now when you have these collectors working together. We know about Lotta.
Yeah.
Because, this is a group of 3 years ago, unknown on the big fashion stage, and because of Instagram you have these characters that have emerged as this collective, and I think we have that transparency to do with there being a collective, and the show is almost the last frontier where you have the stylist backstage. You have these, it's very traditional in the way that it runs, and I think that level of transparency should take over the show.
It's interesting that I think it's on the one hand it's transparency, but actually we have to be quite careful about the way we use transparency, because actually it's not necessarily beneficial to show the blood and guts of it. And actually sometimes it's a bit like sometimes being behind the scenes at a fashion shoot, it can be quite repetitive. You do a few, they all
but that's what similar. I hope this will kill the behind the scenes thing.
But I think there are more imaginative ways. It's sort of looking 100%. At all the component parts of what created the show, pulling out the bits that you would like to reveal that you think are most enticing. It may be different every single time, and what you think people would most like to see, that because that's going to change year on year as well. What we'd like to see now in 2 years' time.
Consumers are bored of seeing a shoot and then the behind the scenes video from
but
the new Burberry fragrance ad. It's like, what is that?
I think maybe we do want the blood and guts though. There's the new Met documentary about to come out showing that huge process that goes into the one night of the year.
But it won't be unmediated. I mean, that's
when
we
exactly.
talk about
how successful Dior and I
exactly. I was about to say
Dior and I, and like I was so surprised that Dior, I'm sure, had a huge amount of control over that film, but you saw Raf having an argument, you saw them in the elevator, you saw
there was some painfully
and people, it was so moving, people fell in love with that. And I think this is what fashion needs to do, particularly if it's going to try and get people to buy from the runway. You want, imagine if that Dior film you could have bought from I know it was a couture show so it doesn't work, but if it had been a ready to wear show, and there was some way of that being able to buy. I guarantee if you've been sat at the cinema with a little thing next to you, I would have bought something in, because you felt like, oh my god, the amount of work that went into that.
And there's the moment the tulle skirt comes out and does
it's so moving. We should talk about the clothes. We haven't talked that much about the clothes.
It's quite hard just to talk about the clothes, because you need some sort of moment. But if I said to you, okay, we'll pay. Just choose. I'm sure you'd be able to do it. I could do it for my wife. But you could do some beautiful piece in there. You could just say, okay, fine, I just got to go that.
Okay, if I was to receive one present for this collection, and those corsets.
Yeah, the corsets are amazing. I wonder if the sailor hat's going to go into production.
But it's true.
It depends on how people buy it online. They're not at that stage yet.
Yeah, they're not at that stage yet. I do think the clothes are super interesting though, because it's a dark collection. I think Prada does that kind of melancholia thing but really well.
Yeah.
But there's a warmth to it as a collection because it's so magpie. And I think that feels really, really current. I think for a long time, minimalist, severe collections felt so luxurious. And now I think it is partly like the Gucci effect and maybe the kind of J.W. Anderson throw it all together effect, that actually something that feels much more kind of madcap feels really, really current. And what's smart about this also is it's not that seasonal. So actually, if they're trying to get people to invest in a piece, some of this is showpieces, but a lot of it is great coats, great skirts, beautiful
very dark
tailoring.
Though.
There's some great romantic colours in it.
Yeah.
There's some real sort of kind of Art Nouveau-esque colours and patterns in it.
Which
not
is very
in this
Prada.
section we're looking at here, but later on in some of those dresses, they're very beautiful.
Yeah.
In a sort of fin de siècle kind of way. They're really lovely.
But then it's not like, the Faces collection or something like that, where it's so, you think of Prada and Prada DNA and you think of, she's an amazing colorist, and you think if you bought a Prada piece from this collection, it feels more like buying a kind of heirloom piece that you can have for a long time, whereas certain Prada collections I don't think have quite felt like that. That's what I love about this, and I think that is because of the history references. It makes you sound really simplistic to say that something that looks like historical dress, you immediately think it's more timeless, and that's what Gucci do so well.
I like the fact that you've got the kind of sailor hats, but the white ones almost look a bit kind of Florence Nightingale.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you've got the kind of trial of fashion. On the other hand, you've got kind of first aid for fashion.
Well, it feels like, it's I think everyone probably wrote this in the reviews of the men's show because everyone was saying difficult 2 years, the flatline profits for 2 years, what have you. And it's like Prada comes out fighting because it's a bit like they're waging a war, but then there's this kind of there is this kind of softness to it, which I find really, really appealing.
I love these looks with the quilting.
Yeah.
That sort of there's always something of a pioneering post-apocalyptic spirit, isn't there?
Yeah.
She's always a little bit, armed and dangerous, ready to brave the night, and
But
it's
I
a bit
like
end of
Prada where
days
it's grown
in a
up.
way, isn't it?
Do you not think when it's, which is why I know last season
Was
got a fair amount of
particularly
criticism.
grown
It was
up.
very grown up, but then you thought they did the sort of pink candy collection that felt so Miu Miu.
I love
And
these
I like this
dresses.
because this feels Prada, you know, when I think of Prada you think of a woman and then Miu Miu is the kind of cheeky little sister. And this is nice for that because it feels expensive, do you know what I mean? Like it feels, but then there's a lot in there to shoot. Like if you were a stylist and you wanted to do a great editorial, like you can...
And I actually do think there are, we see it in the layers, there are separates at an achievable price point. And in some analysis that Luca did at Business of Fashion, he was kind of reckoning how Prada could get out of this 2-year flatline. And he said, really, it's first of all that the accessories, they were trying to get the price point, or they got the price point up to a Chanel and Gucci level, which was just too high. So these buy now, wear now ones, hopefully they're going to be at a more achievable price point. And also that they needed achievable price point ready-to-wear pieces, that people went into these stores and weren't just buying the leather goods.
Yeah. But I think it was a very, like, the accessories in this show were really a strong story. Like, there were lots of, like, mini bags. The footwear was very, you know, very, very kind of out there, but also not... Like, you know, sometimes a Prada statement shoe will tie together the collection, but it doesn't feel like a kind of considered footwear offering. Whereas those boots, I don't know if you guys, it's kind of like the one she's wearing in...
The lace-up boot.
Yeah, those ones. And then also there was a heel.
The T-bar heel.
With the green at the front, which was kind of actually reminding me of the Gucci boot that everyone's been wearing with the fringe on the front. Like, it's a boot. It's a really, really good leather boot. But then there's also the flat ones. And it doesn't feel so much like a seasonal, crazy Prada shoe that you buy or you just go by the constant collection. It's like a bigger offering.
Oh God, look at this coat with the trim on the bottom. That's the dream coat.
It is the
I mean,
dream
there is so much romance to this show. You know, you really do feel seduced.
Can we zoom in on number one? Because I'm so... No, number two, sorry. Because I really do think it's the same guy that did... I think it is, but I don't want to say it definitely is. But I'm pretty sure that's the same guy that did the men's one, which is Christopher Sherman. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's an interesting example because that's like take off the corset and the coat and that'll be like a street style-y Prada piece, but then you could just buy the coat and it's clever.
Unlike last season, which was really a story on suiting and you needed to buy the look.
The look, yeah. Do you think people will respond well to this, and do you think this is where Prada should be now?
I do like the fact that they've dipped their toes in with the bags, if nothing else, just to show that they're forward thinking for a Milan fashion house, and the defense. I do actually see it as defensiveness from Rafe Toledano. So I was actually really pleased to see this from such a traditional house established in 1913.
But it's interesting talking about defensive because, you know, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was at business at Prada, you know, on very much on the kind of strategy side, and he said that quote, and it wasn't even that long ago, where he was like, why would we sell online, you know, why would we sell our beautiful clothes on the same place where you can buy used cars?
Because you can sell more of them.
Yeah, exactly. And what are you saying?
In the end, I mean, we talk about a lot of things, but it's just going to be business. It's going to decide this. If you can get through to 3 million people online and 300 people in print, you're going to go online.
Yeah.
You know,
isn't it daft
if you're going to sell more that way, in the end, these companies are all owned by a business person, usually a businessman, Stanley, but they're all owned by a business person who will say, this is selling more doing it this way, do it this way. I don't care about the art. I don't care about anything else. You're not going to survive unless you sell this. And that's the hard fact of the fashion business. Is actually however much we want it to be artistic and beautiful, it's commerce that's going to decide it.
Yeah.
And that's fair too, that's okay.
Doesn't scarcity sell though?
I think
scarcity.
It only sells a little bit.
It is exactly.
But isn't that? But it's funny
Rarity.
because saying that, you know, well, why would we sell our clothes somewhere where you can always also sell used cars? It's like, but you have showrooms. There's also used car showrooms.
Yeah, I know.
That's the bizarre thing about some people's bizarre approach to online, as if it's literally just one platform and everything has to look the same.
But the fashion approach to online is so antiquated. Like, it goes back to what we were saying about the print campaign and like the amount of money and time that goes into doing an advertising campaign. They are beautiful and timeless, and I love. You know, I love seeing the ad campaigns come out for each house. And I'm not saying get rid of it. It's not like either or.
But each house is spending much less on them.
Yeah.
When we get commission now, what they used to spend, I mean, like, when I used to work for Dior, it was a 7-day shoot. I'm not going to tell you how much I earned, but it was a 7-day shoot. Now it would be a 2-day shoot.
Yeah.
So they're
and
not
you do a behind the scenes film.
Exactly,
at the same
you do
time.
a lot more for it in those 2 days. But you know, they're not investing into them, and that's the difference. So they don't really believe in them anymore.
Yeah.
So they're not saying, okay, we'll pay all this money, we'll do a huge campaign. They're not, you know, now they're looking at this.
Yeah.
Now they're looking at the show and saying, okay, what do we need to do in terms of live streaming or buying straight from online, etc., etc. So they're not investing into the images they were in the print way they used to. They're not quite sure where they're investing. We are only talking about a few people here. because there's how many people show per season? 300 roughly.
God,
across the world?
I think so.
Yeah,
Is
Yeah.
it about 300 or 600? I don't know what it is.
Something. No, it's not 600. It's about
300.
300. Yeah.
But we're
1600.
talking about the Pradas and the McQueens and which are the sort of top level. There's an awful lot of people who haven't changed at all.
Yeah.
And if you go and look at the shows, I mean, was it? I don't know how many show live. It's about 70% in England that show live. But there's still 30% who are just showing exactly the same as they've been doing for the last 50 years.
Well, it's interesting. The whole of the Caring Group is kind of like, we're not gonna sell
Which
immediately.
group, sorry?
The Caring Group, like, we're not gonna engage with the buy now, see now. He said, it's fine for Burberry, but it doesn't suit our businesses.
But that
Big
is what
statement.
I said at the beginning, where I do feel there are brands that need to be seen through the filtered lens of a photographer, the words of an editor, the skill of a buyer.
Definitely.
And then there are other collections that are more instantly desirable, have a core DNA that runs through, and I think each brand just needs to assess what's best for that brand. But that's why
really
Caring Group
exciting.
can't really make summaries on every
all
brand.
their
It's
brands.
they have to fundamentally though understand that the digital world is like a huge treasure trove of activity if you just tap into it, and of course the technology is increasing there, so it's the same kind of
you're not trying to get through to 18-year-old kids who understand that. You're trying to get through to 60, 70-year-old men who don't understand it. I'm not trying to be sexist, but the reality is a lot of those CEOs are men, and they're in their late years, and they're not naturally people who go on the internet.
And I don't think they think of the internet as something diverse. They think if you're doing the internet, you're doing the internet. You have to do what everyone already does. That they think it's like when every brand suddenly was on every social media platform, and it felt like no one had sat there and
every
thought,
brand's website looked the same.
Exactly the same. And I think what's exciting about this now, and I do think it's actually in tandem, is exciting for print, because I think what it means is you will get people doing things that actually suit them. So there probably are some brands that will always sell 6 months after, and it will be very much about the craft, and they won't engage too much with kind of mass and doing stuff online, because maybe they actually can't produce that many clothes, so it doesn't work for them. But then brands that can will do things, but they will treat the internet like something that you can do anything on. Like it's bizarre that you can't imagine a season where every brand's ad campaign looks the same. So why is everyone streaming their show in the same way? Why does every e-commerce site look the same? It's so strange.
I think we have to look at the broader picture though. The value of a brand isn't just the buzz piece of that season. There is so much of the mystique of the brand which is protected in law, and intellectual property pays heed to this idea that there is so much in the mood and the get up and everything that I think we have to be really careful, I don't mean us particularly personally, in distilling something to this one product, because you can't ignore the big picture. If we were going to give people, young Snapchat users in their millions in their droves exactly what they wanted that day, every luxury designer would be making leggings and utility jackets which Kendall Jenner wore to the gym that morning. There should be fluidity in a conversation, but this compromising, the squashing down to see now, have now, taken to the extreme.
But that's what's exciting, is I want to see people, as much as I want to see people opt in and change, I also want to see people opt out.
Yeah, you have to decide what's best for your brand, and it takes ages to decide that.
Like
and
Marnie,
a lot
I
of
love that they
analysis.
weren't on social, that whole thing of not being on social, but they'll stream the show, and that's what's interesting is, it's cute that Gucci are doing all this Snapchat stuff, and I think it works for them. I agree, it wouldn't work for Prada, and it would feel really bizarre. So I'd love to see Prada where what they do online is an amazing catwalk show that looks like a film, and they sell online, and they don't do any kind of, they don't tweet or something like that. And then by contrast, you get other brands where Jeremy Scott his main online thing is Snapchat, or he does like a virtual
the point of discovery has to be something that really suits the brand. There is, you can't make this. It's funny when brands squeeze themselves into just doing, okay, this is popular, we'll do this. And you have to really tune into that. The Marnie woman probably, she has a different idea of how she collects clothing, how she curates her wardrobe.
We are looking at something that's happened in the last sort of 5 or 6 years. A total revolution in the fashion system that hasn't happened for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at this massive change. Nobody really knows where it's going. I mean, a lot of people are opting out of Instagram, opting out of Facebook.
Yeah.
There's a new generation of kids who don't want to be part of that social media.
Yeah.
They want to do their own things, actually experience something, make their own clothes. They're not
Yeah.
interested in any systems that we're providing at all. They want to do their own thing. And of course, that's natural.
Yeah.
So, but this is a massive change around. So it doesn't really make sense yet because, of course, it's blown up in the air.
And it'll all
but it
change by
hasn't
the time
landed.
everyone makes the decisions anyway. Everyone will be like, so this is what we're going to do. Then it'll be...
That's the thing in itself, isn't it? That actually,
Yeah.
we're in the beta era.
Yeah.
That it's all about experimentation. It's all about things not necessarily having to live forever.
Yeah.
So even if whatever they do next season doesn't have to be set in stone.
Yeah.
That's really important to consider as well, I think.
And a joy of digital, focusing on the positives, is it does give brands more power. They're able to talk
Control,
directly to their
yeah.
consumer. They're able to sell directly to the consumer. It's revolutionised our brand, and I think I do think that has huge power, and
Yeah.
that's one of the positives we can really take also for young designers from the last 5 years.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. It's a much better landscape than it was 20 years ago. You asked me right at the beginning what I'd like to see in the
Yeah.
fashion show, what I want. Just better quality.
Yeah.
And whether that's in print image or whether that's in film, you just need more artists in control of that, and less technicians, and less people saying, less business people saying to you, you're going to do it that way.
Yeah.
You actually need to get some art back into the visuals of fashion,
Yeah.
and that's what sadly has been seeped out of it for the last 20 years in terms of going, lowest common denominator, trying to sell as many issues as possible, trying to get through as many people as possible. Actually, they've done that by getting rid of the art. And you need to get the art back in, otherwise people don't want to see it anymore. If it's just so shallow and so mundane, you need the visuals to be much better. If we'd all seen that film directed by some incredible fashion filmmaker, we'd all be in love with it now. We sat through a catwalk show which looked very sort of, the visual presentation, not talking about the clothes, the visual presentation was very mundane. We need to sit through a great piece of art to see that great piece of art that Miuccia Prada has shown us. So I think that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the visuals go right back up where they could be. Imagine what Helmut Newton or Chris von Wagenheim could do if they were a fashion filmmaker.
Yeah.
Imagine what Avedon would do with that. Imagine what the people who have defined what fashion looked like, the great photographers. Now you need to see the great fashion filmmakers define what it looks like now, and that's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Good note to end on. You've given everyone a challenge. Let's see how they rise to it. Well, shall we give Miuccia Prada a round of applause for giving us
Well
so many
deserved
things
one.
to
Gorgeous show.